Okay, wrestling fans, Kurt Klapier here with highschoolwrestlingmatches.com, and I'm here with a friend, Jesse Brock. He actually wrestled at Boise State with my brother-in-law. That's how I got introduced to him. And he has transitioned since graduating from Boise State in 2004, right, Jesse? Is that when you graduated?
Oh, 04, yeah.
Okay. He's transitioned to MMA and Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. While at Boise, he wrestled at 133 pounds and 141 pounds, was a three-time NCAA qualifier, was a two-time Pac-10 champion, and now he's a brown belt in Jiu-Jitsu, and he stays in Boise and just trains all the time. Has done, I believe, 30 MMA professional fights and a bunch of Jiu-Jitsu tournaments. And we invited him on the podcast today to talk a little bit about what MMA training is like versus wrestling training and how you can get involved in different aspects of MMA or grappling once you're done wrestling and you no longer are competing in wrestling. So, Jesse, how are you doing?
I'm good, man. Thanks for having me.
No, it's awesome, man. Let's start out. Tell me about the posters behind you. What are those? What's the story there?
This is one of our athletes. He competed in a show called RFA. It's a real good organization. I mean, it's not UFC level, but a lot of the athletes that do well there get signed to the UFC. So this was actually the main event, which is David Castillo, who's from Utah. And then this is Rick, and he was fighting from Utah. And so we always just bigger shows in our gym. We make little posters to kind of commemorate it. And so, yeah, that's getting
cool. So is your gym called RFA, or is that what the name of your league is, or what?
RFA is it's an MMA promotion. It stands for Resurrection Fighting Alliance. So yeah, we had a guy compete in RFA, and so we've competed in RFA at 3 different shows. Our athletes have, myself included. One of our other coaches has actually competed in RFA. So it's I think we won all our fights. So yeah, we like RFA.
That's cool. So are you a coach and an athlete in MMA?
Yeah. I coach athletes here, and some of our pros are amateurs, and I own the gym I train at. So sometimes it just kind of occurred naturally that I started coaching a lot of the practices, and when we opened it, there was a lot of things I wasn't too skilled at, so I wasn't qualified to coach them then, but my skill set has since improved, so I can teach quite a bit now.
That's awesome. Well, we're going to talk a little bit about what it's like what the difference is between grappling or jiu-jitsu, MMA, and wrestling. But I wanted to let our listeners know that if you'll go to highschoolwrestlingmatches.com and click on the tab that says the Daily Dose, we have a bunch of free wrestling training for you. We might even throw in some submission training if we get some of those, but right now it's free wrestling training. So go there to highschoolwrestlingmatches.com when you get a chance, click on the Daily Dose and sign up for your free wrestling moves. Now, Jesse, when you got done with college, did you always plan on going into MMA, or how did that happen?
No plans at all, actually. First fight I ever really got into, I got paid for. So, no, I was still wrestling freestyle. I was still at Boise State. I was a volunteer assistant, and just kind of doing the freestyle thing. And actually, I qualified for world team trials in my last year of wrestling, and then it was before the Open, and I went to the Open, just did terrible. And I don't know. I just decided not to go to trials. I was kind of frustrated with wrestling in general, the way I've been performing, and I think I was just looking for something a little different. It's something I'd done since 3rd grade, and my friend Scott Jorgensen, actually, he had planned on it, and I know when he finished his NCAA career, he started training just here at a gym local in Boise, and it'd been a few months since the Open, and he just invited me to come along, and I went, and I had some fun, and so I just kind of kept going back because it was fun and something different. And then I watched him fight once or twice and just decided it was something I wanted to try to do, and so here we are 30 fights later.
That's cool. So you've had 30 professional fights, right?
Uh-huh.
Now, when someone wants to get into MMA or grappling, like I know I have a friend, you probably know Brandon Reese, right?
Yes.
Brandon Reese is a black belt in jiu-jitsu. He's never done full MMA, but he's won a world championship in no-gi grappling. So talk to us a little bit about the options. If someone wants to get involved, do they have to go full on MMA, punching and kicking and everything? Or are there other options, or what options are out there?
No, absolutely not. Grappling is becoming a little bigger. I know USA Wrestling is getting involved on that side of it. Flow has a grappling side to their website, and obviously Flow's doing big things in wrestling and now jiu-jitsu. And I think there's probably a little more money now in MMA, but they're starting to do like professional jiu-jitsu events. If you search around, go to there's Metamoris, Polaris, there's Copa Podio, which is an event they do in Brazil where they're starting to pay jiu-jitsu athletes. So kind of organize it like a fight card. There's EBI, Eddie Bravo Invitational, and so there's opportunities for jiu-jitsu players to go out there and get paid too now, and it's cool because not everybody wants to get punched and kicked. So,
so tell me, if someone's looking into this, what do you recommend? Do you go find a gym and you just start full on MMA? Do you go get some jiu-jitsu under your belt first? What's your recommendation?
I would definitely train longer than I did before your first fight. I trained like a month and a half. It's silly. I lost my first fight because I had no clue what to do other than how to wrestle somebody. And the guy I fought was a decent wrestler himself, but he could box a little bit and beat me up. So it was a close fight, but I just didn't have the skill set to go out there and really be successful. And so find a good gym, find a trainer that's helped wrestlers transition to MMA, and taught them other skills, because MMA is evolving quite a bit, and there's good wrestling coaches at every MMA school. And if you're like me and you think you're just going to go out there and dominate with your wrestling skill set, you're going to be in for a rude awakening. And so you give yourself time to train. I'd say a minimum of 6 to 8 months, and just really try to get comfortable striking. Get comfortable with the jiu-jitsu side of grappling, which is some of your old wrestling habits can get you in trouble and land you in submission holds. So you've got to. It takes a while to change some of your old wrestling habits.
Gotcha. So you mentioned that you can make money in jiu-jitsu and MMA, but it's bigger money, bigger potential, at least in MMA. Let's start with the jiu-jitsu side, or the grappling. If I understand correctly, grappling is no-gi jiu-jitsu. Is that right?
Yes, more or less. That's the way they define it. To me, grappling is everything. It's judo, wrestling, sambo, jiu-jitsu. It's gi or no gi. It's just you connected to another person trying to control them. But I think the technical definition is no gi jiu-jitsu.
How do you win, other than the submission? How do you win in a grappling match? Like what's a grappling match like?
Takedowns are still worth points. All the jiu-jitsu tournaments I've been to, it's a takedown still worth 2. And it gets a little dicey because you got people that pull guard, and sometimes as soon as you start to hand fight with somebody, they'll pull guard on you. And so it's up to the ref to determine who initiated the action. Was the guard pulled from like a standstill position, or was it in reaction to a double leg shot that I'm taking? And so it can get a little tricky in terms of scoring takedowns that way. But yeah, takedowns are still worth 2 points. A guard pass, if you land in the full guard and I break the guard, I pass it, that's 3. Knee on belly, I think it's worth 2 or 3 depending on the tournament. Mount is worth 4. Back control with both legs in, or hooks, as I say in jiu-jitsu, is worth 4 points. So there's advantage points for near submission holds. Some tournaments will actually score you points for near submission holds. So there's a lot of different ways to score, and just like in wrestling, it has to do with the referee's interpretation of the rules. The big thing I've noticed, the big difference is you can't have discussions with the referees in jiu-jitsu the same way you can in wrestling. It's a little frustrating for me, but as a coach, especially, like, I can't go and question a call. It's like you get disqualified pretty quick.
Really, they don't tolerate it even asking a question, huh?
Yeah, it's, you know, in wrestling, they'll come and approach you at the table, and they don't always agree with it, but you get a chance to at least have a discussion. I haven't seen that yet in jiu-jitsu.
Interesting. That's interesting. So, talk to me a little bit about the training. No, back up. Before we got into that, I wanted to ask you, you mentioned you can earn money with jiu-jitsu. Do you have to win a tournament, or is it structured kind of like MMA, where if you get good enough, then they'll pay you a set amount for the fight, depending on how big the fight is and stuff?
Both. Like I mentioned briefly, there's a tournament called EBI, the Eddie Bravo Invitational, and they've done some winner-take-all, you know, big money tournaments, and it's pretty interesting setup the way they do it. And it airs on, I think, Fight Pass, which is like UFC streaming. You know, a lot of eyeballs can get to it, but yeah, that's set up like a bracketed tournament. And then there's others where they just have a fight card essentially, and you know, they'll get a group of athletes, and you know, they just match them up like a UFC show. So it's really both. I've got some guys in my gym that know a lot more about it than I do. You know, the details of it, but I think that's more or less the way it works.
Gotcha. So it depends on the fight. And I assume the money comes from sponsors, kind of like MMA.
Yeah, sponsors, and you know, obviously the revenue that the show can generate, which I from what I've seen, like some of the bigger ones, you know, they're starting to get like audiences there to watch. But yeah, I imagine the majority of it comes from sponsorships now.
Do most guys jump in and go do a few grappling tournaments before they do a full-on fight, or do some jump right in and do a full fight?
Probably both. Like I said, I didn't give jiu-jitsu tournaments much of a thought. I didn't even think that occurred to me. I just watched a couple of Scotty's fights and decided it looked like fun, but you know, I definitely wasn't real thoughtful about it when I jumped in. It's just, hey, this looks like something fun to do. I'd like to try it at least once. So yeah, I would, and I think for me, a jiu-jitsu tournament first would have been really beneficial. It would have been something I'm familiar with, but then you're starting to add different rules, you know, the joint locks, the chokeholds. And, you know, from there, I think it would have been an easier transition, adding the stand-up, you know, kickboxing to it.
Are you, do you make a full-time living at this, or do you have to work a real job, so to speak?
Well, I own my gym. That's my full-time gig. You know, we've been doing I've been doing it for 9 years now. We've had the facility, and it's more or less the activities that take place in here is my full-time job. So, you know, sometimes I'm training for my own fights, but I'm also teaching classes. I manage the school, and you know, make money as an owner as well. So it's everything kind of centers around my gym here.
Sounds like a dream job for a fighter. You're able to pay your bills by training other people, and in the process you can keep yourself trained.
Yeah, it's not too bad. I mean, it's definitely hard work sometimes, and you gotta, you know, learn to balance a lot of plates, you know, spin a lot of plates. But yeah, it makes it easier. You know, I don't have to go anywhere to train. I can just drop what I'm doing and, you know, move on to that.
That's cool. That's cool. So let's talk a little bit about MMA transition. Everybody, you know, everybody's a wannabe MMA fighter because of the UFC and whatnot. But nobody understands really, or at least I don't. That's why I'm asking the question, how you get to that level. I know there's various leagues. I know there's Bellator's another pretty big one. RFA, I just heard of today from you. Can anyone start a league? Are there different levels? Like, do you start in a lower league and work your way up, or how does it work?
Yeah, no, you described it exactly right. I think Scotty's first fight was like at an armory in Ontario, Oregon. My first fight was up in Alaska at a decent show, actually. I was fortunate enough. I, you know, from the area and happened to know a few people, so I was able to get a fight there. But yeah, you definitely start off at a smaller show. You know, typically you start off fighting amateur. At least I recommend. And again, I didn't do this, so, you know, I just jumped right into a pro fight, and because I didn't really understand the difference. Like I can get paid or I cannot.
Yeah. What is the difference? What is the difference besides getting paid?
The round lengths, amateur rounds are 3 minutes, pro rounds are 5. The type of strikes you can throw, typically in amateur fights, you can't elbow at all, standing or on the ground. Some amateur leagues won't let you like throw knees to the head, standing or on the ground. It's this type of submission holds you can use are limited often. They don't like a lot of twisting leg locks in amateur MMA just because it can shred the knee and the ankle. And a lot of times these guys they're less experienced grapplers, so they might not know how to get out of that hold, or might not understand the danger they're in when they get put in it. So it's obviously to cut down on injuries and help guys gain experience before they start adding these more dangerous rules to it.
Gotcha. That makes sense for sure. So you get noticed? Are there like scouts at these fights, or do you just do you apply to a bigger show? Do you reach out to them? How do you move up?
Yeah. So typically, if you're fighting amateur, that's another reason I'd recommend finding a gym that has some experience doing this type of thing, because typically they'll have relationships with promoters, smaller shows in your area that and that are always looking for athletes. The shows here in our area always, and there's ones down in Utah that we get calls for about and say, hey, do you guys have any amateurs that you'd like to get on this card? And usually they try to put a handful on so that they're paying for one group to travel. And then yeah, you kind of build a resume as an amateur. And then when you're ready to turn pro, typically go and talk to your coach and say, hey, what do you think? And they'll try to start trying to find some pro opportunities for you. And typically the pay isn't going to be a lot in the beginning, but keep winning, it just keeps going up. And when you turn pro, I'd recommend if your coach isn't going to fill that role for you, then try to find a manager, somebody that can help you get sponsorships, which obviously help offset training costs, and typically they'll pay you per fight, or if you find a sponsor that can pay you, give you product or a set amount of money every month to help just make training easier, that's awesome. And then you just go from there. Obviously winning takes care of a lot of it, so keep winning, keep finding the right fights. Sometimes you'll hear about a guy getting scouted by a certain league or a certain show. Go fight him. If you win, you steal all his shine, and they're looking at you. So
that's a good strategy. So you got to hustle, not just training, but you gotta hustle and get your name known. It sounds like.
Yeah, exactly. And it doesn't help or doesn't hurt, I should say, to have an exciting fighting style. Sometimes that's where wrestlers get a bad rap, because if you fight to your strengths often, you're going to be taking the guy down, staying on top, being heavy, and people want to see blood and punches and kicks and knockouts. And, my advice as a wrestler, make sure you're getting the W, but try to have an exciting style on the ground. Don't just stay chest to chest. You got to be able to posture up and land punches, and develop your jiu-jitsu game so you can finish somebody with a submission, because if you're finishing people, nobody can really say anything, no matter how the finish occurs. So I work hard. I've got quite a few finishes, or some fights that I've won with ground strikes. And, I wouldn't say my style is the most exciting, but I don't think it's boring either. So try not to be a boring fighter.
How when I first started watching MMA, I was in junior high. I think that's when it started. It was the Hoist Gracie days, and there were actually less rules than there are now. And wrestlers and/or grapplers just dominated. In fact, they pretty much split them down the middle back then. You were either a striker or a grappler. Is that still the case? Are wrestlers still the dominant people in the MMA, or has that changed?
Wrestlers that have adopted a different skill set, or developed a different skill set, are doing very well. But you can't be a pure wrestler anymore, not at a high level. And, you know, same goes for all of it. You know, you can't be just a high-level striker anymore. You can't be just a high-level jiu-jitsu player. It's, you know, some people like that. Some people don't. You know, they miss the old days where it was more of a style versus style thing, because I think probably because it led to more exciting fights and, like, devastating finishes. Now, you know, guys are pretty good, you know, most, especially like in the UFC. You know, everybody's fairly well-rounded. If they're not like great offensive wrestlers, they've at least got good defense. And so, yeah, to answer your question, you cannot be one-dimensional anymore. But, you know, guys that come from a high-level wrestling background and, you know, understand how to teach their body how to do things and still do very well. You know, the work ethic that you have to become a good wrestler applies to, you know, what it takes to be a good fighter.
So wrestling's a big head start is what I'm hearing, but you still got to learn the other skills.
Mm-hmm.
Because I remember Mark Schultz did a fight, and he was training some guy, and the guy hurt his thumb, I think, and so he just jumped in at the last minute and took the fight for him. And and he fought a boxer. This was when you pretty much had one skill set, and he took the boxer down with no trouble. The boxer couldn't even stop his shot, and then he beat on him on the ground and ended up winning. But but nowadays I've noticed what you're saying, at least in the UFC, because that's pretty much all I have really seen, is they're all at the very least good at stopping a takedown.
Yeah, I mean, anymore, you're not just going to touch a striker's legs and then just have them fall on their back. It might have used to be, it might have been that way a long time ago, but, you know, it's just definitely not going to happen now. And you're going to be eating punches in the meantime if you have, you know, no head movement to close the distance. And so, you know, and honestly, like, the more I've trained other arts, you know, jiu-jitsu, boxing, Muay Thai, it's helped me understand wrestling better, because I just have to learn how to apply it in different situations. And so you know, you got to kind of re-examine, you know, what you're doing and, you know, and how it works. And because then I have to apply it in a different environment. And it's been helpful, actually. It's made me a better wrestling coach, because I can break it down a little bit more because I've had to.
I interviewed a kid or a couple weeks ago that he hasn't done any pro fights like you yet, but he's done a lot of kickboxing, and he swears that the kickboxing, he started doing it in high school, and wrestling was his main passion, but he started doing kickboxing, and he swears that the kickboxing helped him get quicker on his feet and actually helped his takedowns in wrestling. Would you agree with that?
Oh, definitely. You know, there's a lot of training that you know, boxers and strikers do that is, you know, like things like jump roping, you know, like for long rounds. And I did a little jump roping, and, you know, when I was a wrestler, but it wasn't anything I really focused on, you know, and I do a lot of that now. Just the fact that you're up on the balls of your feet a little bit more, you know, they kind of focus on that, and just little details with your body that, you know, I think are brought up in wrestling but not focused on. And it's definitely helped. You know, it helps your hand-eye coordination. Just you know, I recommend, like, high school kids, if you're looking for something to do during the summer, stay on the mat, stay active. I always recommend, like, you know, coming down to our gym and doing a little boxing, a little Muay Thai, a little jiu-jitsu. And, you know, if you're not a big summertime wrestler, but you want to stay active, it's a great way to, you know, just improve your body, be a better athlete. You know, that's always going to help you in a wrestling match.
What's the name of the gym in case someone's in the Boise area and wants to go check it out?
It's Combat Fitness, Straight Blast Gym of Idaho. It's Straight Blast Gym is our affiliation, and we're the Idaho school.
Cool. And where in the Boise area are you located?
It's just right downtown, Americana and River Street.
Cool. Well, guys, if you're in the Boise area, I recommend you go check it out. Go say hi to Jesse, tell him you heard him on this podcast, and see what his gym's all about. Let's talk a little bit about the training, though. You're a friend of Jorgensen, and I heard from Cam Jones one time. I want you to verify if this story is true or not, but I heard from Cam Jones one time that Jorgensen, because of his wrestling background, he's used to training 110% all the time, that when he got into MMA, the guys thought it was crazy how hard he trained. And so I guess what I'm asking is MMA training harder, or is wrestling training harder? What's your take on that?
I wouldn't say one is harder than the other. The way you do it is a little different. You know, we can experience this with some competitive athletes sometimes when they come in and they're just trying to punch and kick as hard as they can. You need to slow it down to learn the technique correctly. You know, there's to develop proper body mechanics. So, but you know, in wrestling, we have a tendency to wrestle hard every day, and it's a little safer because you're not getting punched in the head. But you know, so you don't spar in the gym every day because you just won't be able to talk after a while. Especially if you're just starting out, you're going to be getting hit a lot, and you know, so you want to make sure you know, there's other ways to simulate sparring or help improve you know, your fighting skills without getting hit, and that's pad work, that's bag work. There's, you know, just like light touch sparring that helps, you know, improve your movement and your mechanics. You know, and I will say this too, and this is something I've kind of learned is, you know, wrestling, you've got a shorter window for, because, you know, you've only got 4 years in high school, you've got 4 to 5 years in college, and then, you know, if you're going to continue wrestling internationally, you've got a few years there. So I think it's kind of necessary to go a little harder because you've got a shorter window. You know, and I've kind of learned this from some of the SPG coaches. It's like if somebody walks in my gym and says, "Hey, I want to be a black belt," you know, in jiu-jitsu, or I'm assuming I've got them for 10 years. You know, if they want to be a fighter and be a successful pro, I'm going to assume I've got them for 10 years. So you've got to change your training such that you can train consistently for 10 years and, you know, not get burned out, not get injured, you know. So if you're just, you know, sparring every day for 10 years, your career, you know, you're attempting to do that, it's not going to work. So, you know, it's different. The sports are different, and you know, I think that the training is proper for the sport. That's, you know, and obviously some guys go a little harder, but there's parts of MMA training that are harder than wrestling. You know, obviously the blows that you're taking to the legs and the body and the head. The grappling side is a little bit easier, I think, because there's jiu-jitsu. You can be on your back. You can, you know, rest a little bit more if you need to. Whereas wrestling, you're always on your feet. Someone's pulling on your head, pushing on you. You're always kind of connected to somebody with, you know, gravity in the mix. So I probably didn't give you a definitive answer to that question, but you know, I think if you're trying to like quantify whether one is harder than the other, you don't have enough experience in one or the other to say.
Gotcha. What I'm hearing is in wrestling training, you need to do more jump roping, and a wrestler who's training MMA needs to learn
Slow
to pace
it down.
themselves a little bit.
Slow it down. Yeah, just that would be my recommendation. And I learned through experience and mistakes that I've made. Just don't be impatient. You know, I know if you come in my school and you say, "Hey, I want to fight like next month," I'm going to say you're going to have to go to find a different gym if that's the case. You know, I'm not in the business of getting somebody into a situation I'm not prepared for. And, you know, it's my own personal experience. And so.
That's cool. One last question, because I think there's a lot of the listeners that don't know this, like myself, and then we'll wrap up. But in professional fights, what's a low end fight financially? Like, how much will they pay you for a bottom level fight versus like a UFC fight versus a top tier fight?
I mean, if you look at the disclosed paydays, which are available online, depending on the state guys fight in, I mean, there's athletes making six figures, you know, they're making, and typically in MMA, you have a winning purse, or excuse me, a show purse, which you get paid regardless, and then you have a win bonus, which
are there athletes making six figures that aren't in the UFC, or?
A few, but not many. There's a few organizations. Ben Askren, I think, over at ONE FC, he's making that. I think there's a few fighters in like World Series, Bellator maybe, but the majority of six-figure athletes are fighting in the UFC. But a low-level fight, I mean, my first fight I made $500. Well, I take that back. I was going to make $500. I made $150 because I lost. So, that's $150.
So the purse is bigger if you win. Is that typical?
Definitely, yeah. It was weird. My first fight was you made $150 to show, and then like $350 to win.
Gotcha.
So I got the 150. But it typically, like a lot of our younger pros, sometimes they'll start off making like 5-5. I think the lowest I would ever accept for any fighter is like 3-3. But
Gotcha.
I typically shoot for like 5-5 for our beginner pros.
Gotcha. Well, cool, man. Well, hey, thanks for your time. I think this was helpful for some guys. Is there anything else you want to say about your gym or anything like that?
Yeah, I mean, just what you said. If you're in the area, and you know, I get it, man. It's wrestling's a tough road to hoe, and sometimes, you know, if you're not one of the top level athletes, you know, in the country, there's not a lot of opportunities past, you know, high school or college. And but if you know, if you still want to be a competitive athlete, just, you know, look up your local MMA school, and even if getting punched or kicked isn't your thing, there's opportunities to still compete in grappling. You know, and the skills that you already have will apply, you know, well to a jiu-jitsu situation, and you can still, you know, be in shape and have fun, and you know, and you know, just it still brings you a lot of happiness. So you don't have to stop being, you know, doing you know, battle with people and you're done with high school or college.
That's cool, man. I appreciate that. And I've actually noticed that there's a lot of guys that were just kind of okay wrestlers that have done well in the UFC. They're not all the national champs, and they're not all world champs that are doing well. It's some guys that, in fact, didn't Dominic Cruz, wasn't he just kind of an okay high school wrestler?
Yeah, I don't think he was anything too special, but you know, and that's why, you know, they are two different sports, 100%. You know, some guys just really take to the striking and understand how to kind of put the two together, and you know, there's high level wrestlers that never figure it out, and it, you know, it just depends on the athlete, and because there are two different sports.
That's cool, man. Well, thanks for your time. And that's it for today's podcast, guys. I just want to remind you to go to highschoolwrestlingmatches.com and sign up for the free wrestling moves. Jesse, maybe we'll have you film a couple submission or grappling or striking videos that we could share with them too sometime.
Yeah, if you actually go to our website, combatfitness.com, there's a whole techniques video section. So, I mean,
okay,
we could, you know, link some of those to it, or, you know, shoot some for you individually.
That'd be awesome. So, guys, check out combatfitness.com, right?
Yep.
Okay, man. Well, have a great day, and we'll talk to you soon.
Thanks a lot. Appreciate it.
Thank you, man.